Welcome to Curious with Josh Peck. Start the show.
Welcome back to the Curious Podcast with Josh Peck. I'm Josh Peck. It's weird saying your name when, like, in the third person. The Curious Podcast with Josh Peck. Who is that? I'm him. He is me. I am they. We are we. Fucking what? Yo, guys, welcome back. This is such a pleasure. I can't tell you what it means to me that you guys are listening to this thing that was just a dream in my heart that I believed, I figured that, like, I potentially was interesting-ish enough to maybe listen to on a weekly basis, even though it's really like you're tuning in for the interview guests. But nevertheless, it's like I had a small inkling of an idea that perhaps the way in which I wanted to execute this podcast would be compelling to you, the listener, and you are validating that, and that means a lot. God, it does. It really. Wow. What's up? How are you guys? I wish I could get some feedback, like some immediate feedback where you could say, like, I'm well, I'm doing good. Just another Tuesday. Or conversely, you could be like, I'm not great, Josh, and I'll be honest. And I'm going to put myself out there in a big way and tell you that, shit ain't serene. My life's not exactly going to plan, but I'm trudging. I'm getting through the day as best I can with the hopes that tomorrow may be better. And if that's you, fucking God bless. I know what that feels like because I've been there. I will be there. Like tomorrow, maybe. You know? Team doing the best we can, and sometimes just not doing bad is good enough. You know what I mean? Sometimes just existing gang is a gang I want to be a part of because I identify with that. I know what that feels like. It's not easy. And it's not that hard. Well, sometimes it's hard. But, I get it. I do get it. What's going on in the world? What can I talk about? What can I... Oh, Jesus. What can I use this platform to talk about so that I can make a complete fool of myself and become all the things that I hate? Oh, here's one. Here we go. Rush hour commuters were hard-pressed to find a copy of the New York Post near the Port Authority bus terminal in Times Square on Monday. A dramatic cover ad on the New York Post for the streetwear company Supreme turned today's tabloid into an impossible-to-find commodity. Basically, the New York Post put a Supreme emblem on their cover, and you can't find a New York Post anywhere in the city right now. Now, I'm not hating on the New York Post. It's actually like quite a fun read. It's, I'm from New York, and it's very much like bite-size, some slightly salacious, maybe that's not the right word, but like, you know what I mean. It's not exactly the Times, let's just say. It's a good paper. I mean, I've enjoyed it in the past. It's sort of taken a turn for the weird over the last couple of years, but nevertheless, they put a Supreme logo on their cover, and now you can't find it because every hype beast in New York City is like, yo, I got to get that shit. I don't completely identify or understand that mentality, but like, God bless. Supreme is laughing all the way to the bank, and I see the cats waiting outside like the Supreme store. And granted, that was me at 20 years old outside the Bape store in New York on Green Street waiting for the new drops. You know what I'm saying? Waiting for that new to get some ill patent leather sneakers that I 3 years ago gave to the Goodwill because I said I've got 24 pairs of these and I'm never going to wear them again because they're loud as fuck. They're dope. They'll probably come back in like, 8 years into style, and I'm going to be so upset at myself that I didn't have the foresight to know that these are going to be dope. And right now it's just like a resting period because it seems like anything that was cool once will be cool again. But damn, I mean, you put that Supreme logo on something and people, they got to have it. They need it. So I can't even really hate, like, it's dope that people are so into it, I guess, but I don't share that. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't understand what all the fuss is about. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm old. I'm getting old for sure. Oh, this was some interesting shit right here that really deserves some talking about, and God knows I know it's worth talking about. Oh, HuffPost. Boom. Is it ever okay to check your partner's phone? Marriage therapists weigh in a survey. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 5 men admitted to doing so. Well, HuffPost, allow me to weigh in with my feelings here at the Curious Podcast with our lead contributor, Josh Peck. No, it fucking isn't. There is never a time when it's okay to look at someone else's fucking phone. I have set that rule. I believe in it truly and deeply that nothing good can come out of looking at your spouse's phone. Now, if my wife were to look at my phone, she would find nothing. The only thing that she might slightly bristle against or, find odd is maybe, a half-naked selfie that I've taken of myself in the bathroom mirror to see if I've got any gains. And look, I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not proud that I take photos like that, and I don't usually. But look, sometimes I'm weak. Nevertheless, I can't believe how many people look at their spouse's phone secretly, trying to find something, and you always will. You're always going to misinterpret some odd text, some weird exchange that you weren't privy of or you don't know the history of. So something that was fairly innocent to you seems like, I knew he was a scumbag, or I knew she was floozing around on me with Jeff at the office. They're probably out, getting all steamy during their coffee breaks and in my wife's Toyota Camry. And I knew it. But the truth is like cheaters cheat. You know what I'm saying? Like the truth will come out no matter what. And so I made the decision early on in relationships in general, but of course in the most important relationship of my life, the one I have with my wife, that I can't spend my life being worried or jealous or try to control the idea that I will somehow be able to intercept a potential cheating moment if I'm just on my game. Fuck that noise. It does not work. My wife and I do not look at each other's phones. Maybe I'm tripping and she's looking at mine every other night and I just don't know it because she is smarter than me. But I don't think so. I don't think she needs it. I don't look at her phone. I'm not even quite sure of her code. I'll be honest. If we were in an emergency and all we had was her phone, I would only be able to use the SOS or emergency function on her phone if she wasn't able to tell me the code. Word up. Straight up. And it saves us a lot of discomfort and arguments, and I can't believe how many of my friends' wives and how many of my friends' husbands look at each other's phones and the only thing that comes out of it is disagreements, arguments, and it's just static. Shit gets hectic mad quick. So, I'm not Dr. Drew. I'm not a relationship expert, but I'm in one. Yeah, so just saying. I'm not trying to talk your ears off. You know what I mean? You're like, Josh, I didn't sign up for this rant, but I'm feeling ranty lately. I think next week, actually, I'm going to bring one of my boys, my buddy Heavy, who's a good friend of mine, on the pod, and we're going to chop it up for 20 minutes before the podcast, talk about current events, what's going on in each other's lives, just as a test. And if you guys hate it, let me know. If you like it, let me know through some sort of channel. Just get my number. Get my number from someone. Anyway, today's guest, Danny Chun, my guy. I love him very much. He is the creator of the show Grandfathered I did with John Stamos. He's also a writer and producer on shows like The Simpsons, heard of it. The Office, heard of it. Another show, Speechless, it's on the air now, that's gotten incredible reviews. Danny was nice enough to give me a job on Grandfathered, a show he created. And he's just so impressive and a really good dude, a mensch of a guy, as my people would say. and we had a great conversation. So I'm really excited to share with you. Danny, enjoy. I keep the mics hot the whole time, baby.
I know, yeah. You don't want to miss anything.
I'm trying to get that.
You never know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I want to keep it live and
I'm
in
dangerous.
charge. It's gonna be pretty incendiary. I can already tell.
Yeah.
Some shit's about to get popped off. Yeah, just start with all the secrets and the salacious stuff that I can sell to the tabloids. Please, what's Steve Carell really like?
Oh, the real scoop on Steve Carell is he is a wonderful person.
He really seems like a wonderful person.
Yeah, he's great. He's awesome. I mean, yeah, got nothing bad to say about Steve Carell.
Oh, I don't want it to be true. Someone that talented and so lovely.
The thing that they say, which would be really damning of you, is that the people who become famous late in life are like the most grounded about it,
right,
and chill about it, which means that you're a real piece of shit, I guess.
Well, it's a good thing that I'm hitting this big divot in my career.
Right, so you can reset.
Yeah, so it's nice. I'll have the next 10 years to become a real person, and then
Right.
40s will be my upswing. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Let's hold off on the inevitable delusion antidepressants. So I was thinking about, I was like just trying to do some mild research, even though I know you and we're friends before we did this. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think about you is just impressive. Impressive.
That was what I was hoping you would say.
Is that
That's
what
really,
you're putting out there?
That's the image. That's my brand. Impressive.
And yet, like, for someone so impressive, and I'm sure you come into contact with these people all the time in our business, is like, especially funny people, I feel like you are the funniest person in the room and you have no need to prove it. And I find that so refreshing because amongst comedians and funny people, it definitely feels like a constant one-upmanship, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely true with like, especially performers, people who've got that background more so than the writing background. Although there's certainly plenty of really insecure, needy writers out there too.
Right.
I mean, yeah. I think like part of it is. I don't know how much of it is like based on just like who I am, like, being Asian. I feel like, kind of culturally there's like a certain like humility that they try to train into you. But I also think it's just like part of just being like a comedy writer. I feel like you're constantly so self-aware of, because like I'm constantly observing and like making like kind of micro judgments about everything I see and observations and stuff like that.
Right.
And I'm fully aware that like other comedy writers are doing the same of me, and so like for generally like I just try to like avoid being the object of someone's scrutiny too much, or just being someone's the target of someone's like crazy sense of humor or something like that. So
right.
Generally like I feel like it's I'm content to just kind of sit back and be the observer rather than like the focus of attention.
But it does seem as though there's two types of, well, right now I'm like deciding like, do I go Asian road? Do I go comedy writer road? Where do I go? Want to handle both. But I've noticed in just things I've worked on where it's like there are two types of writers. There's the guy that's machine gun fire, doesn't critique that much, just wants to, It's like 1 out of 10 of these is going to be, flames.
Yeah.
So, and then there are the guys that are a little bit more calculated and take the time to craft something. Maybe they don't get the joke count in, but the ones they get are quality.
Yeah. I guess, and I feel like I'm the latter, right? You think, is that kind of what you're...
You're so interesting, right? Because it was funny. I would think about certain things with your writing, and that you were very stealth in the sense of like the joke, your particular brand of comedy, which is the one I love, is like where jokes would creep up on you, or the setup would be, you wouldn't go in the typical direction that you would think the setup was taking you, which I love.
Yeah, no, that's so nice to hear. Thank you. I mean, part of it is just how my brain works. I'm not like, I would be terrible at improv. Right. I think I would be horrible I would just die up there. And right. I don't think that's true of a lot. I think a lot of comedy writers, even if they're not performers by nature or by background, would be great at improv. But my mind just doesn't work that way. And like, so I do have to sort of take the time to think up the joke and kind of approach it and craft it in my brain before I'm ready to say it. And the other thing I would say that kind of developed this is just the fact that my first job was at The Simpsons.
Right.
And like The Simpsons like basically is like this crazy like joke factory. Like that's what you're doing. Like 80% of the job is just pitching jokes.
Right.
You know, and when I was there, you know, starting out like 22 years old, I was terrified, and I was really like, it's funny, 'cause I actually came in really cocky. I was like, oh, like, you know, like nobody over the age of 22 is funny. I was like, I'm gonna
Right.
I'm gonna blow these people away. I'm gonna like walk in here. These people who have kids and stuff, like no one's funny when they have kids. It's like,
Yeah.
so I was like, I'm just gonna walk in here and like revolutionize these people's conception of what comedy can be. And then like the first day, by the end of it, I was like shitting myself. I was like, these people are so funny, and they're so smart, and they're so much better than me.
Right.
And so I just like over the course of the next few months, just to try to basically not get fired, learned how to really sort of craft a joke and thoughtfully, you know, sort of fine tune it in my brain before I would say it, because I didn't want to be that guy, especially the new guy and the young guy coming in and just like pitch, like just, you know, 1 in 10 is decent, you know?
Right.
I really just wanted to feel like, okay, if I'm gonna, you know, deign to talk in this room of legends, like I gotta have like something that the thing I say has to be at least pretty good. And so I would just sit there and like try to come up with something, and like, you know, probably, you know, the majority of jokes I would come up with, I would sort of nix in my own brain before I even said them.
Does it quickly become, because I know like having been able to work with, you know, a few legends here and there, it's like the quicker you can humanize them, the better. You know, the quicker and it's like, I'm an asshole, so all I want to do is find faults and be like, I knew it was all fluff and smoke and mirrors, like you're just like me. But inevitably, there is a certain sensibility of like I remember with our mutual friend Dan Fogelman, and that he blessed me with 2 scenes in his movie with Pacino.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like the God, you know? And I'm around him, and I'm like, you act a lot like Al Pacino. like he's just walking around like, oh, I'm exhausted. You know, but like amazing, and everything I could have asked for. And then first 2 takes, you're sort of like nervous and uptight, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is just play. This is just like the best night in acting class, where you feel like you've got a partner there has your back completely, and if you're there for them, you have this great back and forth. So was that sort of how it was like working in that room of greats?
I mean, some of them are to this day have not been humanized in my mind, and I'm still terrified of them.
Really?
Oh yeah. And then, you know, I think it was just like the fact that I didn't really have a choice. If I wanted to stay in that room, if I wanted to have that job, I just had to get used to it and get over it, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, certainly I'm sure that like one thing one of the writers kind of said to me, you know, after a couple months in, was just like, you know, and I thought he was like one of the funniest people I'd ever been around. He was like, he was like one thing you realize when you get a job as a comedy writer is that no matter who you are, 90% of what you think is funny is not funny.
Right.
And that really like stayed with me. It made me really feel like, okay, it's like I'm not the only one. Like when a joke for me when I would pitch a joke and it would fall flat, I would be like crying about it on the way home. And then I realized like, oh, you just let that go. You just like everyone does it. The funniest people in the world, some of whom were in that room, you know, the legends like George Meyer, were just, you know, they were pitching, you know, their pitch success rate was like 20% or whatever, you know?
Right.
So that really taught me. But do you when you talk about your experience with Pacino, do you feel like that was your like do you feel like that was Pacino making you comfortable, or do you feel like you just kind of got comfortable and it wouldn't, and, you know, and it was sort of more about what you acclimating to the situation rather than Pacino being a uniquely sort of, you know, approachable actor to work with or something?
In my experience, and I don't know how it's been for you, the more famous and legendary the actor, or in any sort of form, but as actors, the nicer and more accommodating they are. They have no airs about them. They're natural leaders. They've proven themselves. Right. And your game elevates to match theirs. Otherwise, it just won't work.
Yeah.
And it's a truly, and it reveals itself more and more to me, and I feel like I get it now at 31, and if I'm still acting at 41, I'm sure I'll have an even deeper understanding of that. Acting, it's truly a selfless sport in the sense of your only duty is to serve the story and the words, like, and that's really it. And if you take care of it, it will take care of you.
Right.
And I was watching, I got lucky enough to go to a class the other night that Vincent D'Onofrio was teaching. And he said something so interesting, which was so true, in that he said, any good writing, the intention of the scene is hidden. He said, because that's what makes it good. Because if it was very much in your face of like, this is the scene where you fall in love, or this is the scene, there'd be no nuance to it. It'd be very sort of cookie cutter.
Yeah.
So good writing is in the subtle ways that the writer has sort of peppered these intentions around. He's like, so it's your job as the actor to take the time to be a detective and find it, to find that hook and say like, I really need to fall in love with her here, or I need to, be in total fear of my future, or whatever the intention is.
Right.
And so I found that to be sort of true, that it's like, if the writing is good, the writing will take care of you, but you need to take the time to figure out really what the writer's asking of you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and I think that's, I mean, he puts it in such a concise way, but I do think like that's often something that we talk about in like the writer's room, and I think it takes a while for writers to learn to talk this way about writing. But yeah, we'll often talk about like, okay, here's what the scene's about, but what's it really about?
Right.
Or like, here's what this episode is really about, and that's, yeah, that's totally true. And even, I mean, the most random example, like I just saw the movie Blockers, and like, when you see the ad for it, it's like, they say, it's like, it's three parents on prom night trying to make sure their daughters don't have sex, right?
Female Superbad.
Yeah.
Yeah. John Cena, what more do you need to know?
Exactly.
Fucking see it.
But like, but I saw it and I really liked it. And part of what I really liked about it was that it was about so much more than that. And,
right.
it was actually a movie about these three parents who are sort of panicking about the fact that their kids are growing up and
right.
they're going to leave them. And like it was so much richer and deeper for that reason, and I went into it thinking it was just that surfacey sort of like caper of cock blocking.
Right.
And that's why it was like, to me, the rare, like really interesting and good R-rated comedy.
And that speaks to the point of like, I have a friend, a great writer friend of mine, Britt, and he always says like, don't forget that The Hangover is a love story amongst friends. Like
Right.
It's about guys who really like care for each other, and that you can always write a joke later, but if the heart's not there, and I think Apatow does such a good job at this, like if the heart isn't there and this isn't a story that people can truly identify with, no matter what, even if it's the funniest thing, half an hour through, people are going to lose interest because they're not invested in who these people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like whenever, that's why like, I think most TV writers will say like the hardest thing is coming up with the stories.
Right.
And part of that is because like you'd think it's really easy. Like on The Simpsons, when I started there, I was just like, oh, like, okay, you need stories like, okay, Homer goes to the Super Bowl. Homer goes to, Homer takes up skateboarding. Homer like
Right.
Homer becomes a fireman. Like what else do you need, guys? And what I realized was like, oh, the reason that it's really hard to come up with stories is because for any of those things, that's just the surface of it. And what you really are trying to find is like, okay, what's going on between the characters
Right.
in that episode where Homer becomes a firefighter or whatever. Is it like, is it a marriage story where, Marge is worried about Homer's safety for the first time, or, whatever it is.
Right.
And those are both, it's hard to find interesting things, of that nature. And it's also hard to find ones that you haven't done a lot before.
Right. Do you think, I guess let's go back to, I want to know, like, so you grew up in Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
and where are your parents from?
My parents grew up in South Korea.
South Korea. And then when did they immigrate to America?
In the mid-'70s.
In the mid-'70s, and then Danny comes in 1980.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Oh, you
there
did
you
your
are.
research. Yeah.
I know stuff. That's what's up. And so I guess and you grew up in the Poconos?
Yeah.
Were you the only Koreans in the Poconos?
There were a couple, but at my school, there was in my grade of like 270 people, there was one other Asian.
Wow.
She was Chinese, yeah.
Were you guys friends?
No, I hated her. That's how it goes, right? It's like there's one
Sworn
other
enemy.
Yeah, and it's like, oh no, I can't be this person's friend.
Oh, I hated other fat kids growing up. I really did. And I projected everything on them. So, like, when they would make jokes, I'd be like, insecure. I'd be like, what are you running from?
Yeah.
And so what was that? Because here you are, right? So really at home, you have these two parents who are pretty newly immigrated to this country. And then your life outside of home is as American as American gets. So what was that balance like growing up? Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I was super aware of it. I mean, it was like a huge part of, I guess, my identity, was just wanting to feel like wanting to assimilate, and
Right.
it's interesting, I think, like that, I think at that time in America, like that was sort of the word that was like the buzzword among, I think, immigrants when they were talking about their kids. They wanted them to assimilate, right? Like
Right.
they wanted to, and my parents, they didn't move to like a heavily Asian community or anything like that. We weren't living in Southern California or New York or something like that. We were in a place that had almost no Asians, and and so I think that was also part of that was, I think, that they wanted us to, be around non-Koreans.
Right.
And so yeah, that was a huge part of my identity, was that sort of feeling of being being a little bit of an outsider, and and I think that that's probably a lot of what informed me getting interested in comedy. I think like so many people, there's always like, I feel like something in someone's backstory that they can point to as like the reason they got interested in comedy, or wanted to be a funny person.
Right.
Some sort of damage, or some sort of some sort of insecurity, or something that made them feel different and wanting to be accepted. And I think that was probably it for me. And I did feel accepted. I had friends. I wasn't, it was not a miserable childhood at all, but I was constantly just aware of the fact that I felt like I was sort of a guest.
Right.
But I was happy, and I was so it was not, it wasn't traumatic.
Do you think that, because I've always felt that comedy is cultivated, and it's a sense of humor is born out of it, or a sense, being funny comes from usually very unfunny circumstances. And for me, it's like whenever I've, been in an audition or met a guy that's like very good looking and hunkish, and he's really trying to be funny, there's a part of me that goes, I'm probably funnier than you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, because I was 300 pounds.
Right.
Like, and I'm a kid actor, and I never met my dad, and the litany of other things of my weird story growing up.
Yeah.
But like, I couldn't be the funny, or I couldn't be the sad fat kid. I had to be funny.
Right.
I had nothing to get by. And by the way, and some people like call me on this, I'd be like, I would have traded it in a second to look like you.
Right.
To have had your,
Yeah.
your beautiful upbringing. But what have you, it is what it is. And so, yeah, to your point, I
That's
think
why it's always so annoying when someone very good looking is also really funny.
Who's that?
Ryan Reynolds. Come on.
Yeah, he's
really
great.
funny. Paul Rudd.
No,
He's
Paul
a
Rudd's
handsome guy.
Paul Rudd's me good looking. Like good looking for a normie. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like he's not movie star good looking.
Right.
No disrespect, Paul Rudd. I love you. But I think he'd be the first to say that.
Yeah.
I get so caught in when I'm auditioning for things, and that I'm not character-y enough to be character-y, and I'm not, square jawed and leading man enough to be, that guy.
Right.
And so I'm like, where's just like the okay looking for a normal guy parts, like Paul Rudd, Tom Hanks, like these are just like okay looking guys. Like I
Right.
could do that.
Yeah,
Steve Carell.
Yeah, exactly.
Just helps that they're comedic geniuses, but whatever, no worries. And so, I knew for me, and maybe this is sort of universal amongst kids at any age, but I had a very specific upbringing. Like I had a single mom, and she was like fabulous and Jewish and loved the theater and was very and domineering in all the best ways. And I felt myself slightly resentful only because I had such a need to want to be quote unquote normal, what I saw on television, and just be like an athlete and
Right.
go home to a very like typical family life, and I didn't have that with my mom, and it's all the things that I revere and appreciate about her now with some hindsight at 31.
Yeah.
But at 13 I was like, why can't I just be like my friends?
Yeah.
Did you have any of that growing up? Were you like a little bit, were you ever not resentful, but like a little bit of wishing that you could have what was out there?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, and I never resented my parents about it. I was never, it was never that sort of thing. But definitely, I just wanted, like, I didn't want my Asianness to be
Your
a
identity.
thing that people would talk about. I wanted it to be like a tertiary thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's so funny though, because like I think the older you get, the more comfortable you become with the things that make you different and unique, right? But like when you're
Right.
in middle school or something, like you're terrified of it. So yeah, like at that time, I remember the first time, like I almost like surprised myself, with the way I reacted. It was like I was like 6 years old at like a music class, like at the YMCA or something, and we went around, and it was like all these 6-year-old kids in Pennsylvania, all white,
Right.
and the teacher just went around asking everybody what they had for dinner the previous night.
Oh
And like,
man.
and one of those kids like spaghetti, and then one of them says like corn, and then another one says corn, and they come to me, and I had I think like some sort of Korean fish soup or something, right? And I just said corn. And then I was like, I don't think I'd ever had. I don't remember, like I didn't even know what they meant, like when they said they had corn for dinner. I didn't even know what that
Right.
was. But like I remember I was like, I felt a little twinge of like self-awareness and self-consciousness and shame that I had like lied about it. And my mom was in the room,
Wow.
but I don't even know I don't know if she paid attention. And she didn't, it's not like it's not like the story that has like the ending of like her crying in the car. And
Yeah,
it was, like,
imagine you guys making eye contact and a single tear rolling down her face.
No, again, we never talked about it again. I've like never told that story until now. Like but I remember feeling like, oh, why did I do that?
Right.
And that was a huge part of my childhood, was just kind of like trying to, like avoid, divert the attention away from the Korean stuff.
Sure.
But then in high school, and in high school, then it became like a little bit more of a nuanced thing where I sort of started to own it in a comedic way a little bit more. You know what I mean? I became like, kind of like
yeah, in your bag of tricks.
yeah. It's like the fat guy who makes fat jokes by himself or whatever,
Right.
And so yeah, that became sort of the more kind of teenage way I dealt with it. But then at the same time, also then people started to like, I started being a little bit more confident in it, and my friends were really excited to come over to my house and eat Korean food and use chopsticks and stuff, and it sort of became a little bit more of a of a feature and not a bug.
I'd pick Korean fish stew over corn any day.
Oh,
of the
I know.
week,
Now,
right?
yeah,
Are you
all
kidding?
it's all I eat now is Asian food.
Yo, guys, what's up? Look, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I gotta talk about Sunbasket for a second, and you're about to understand why. Look, in a perfect world, I'd have enough time to cook dinner every night. And listen, there'd be some ambiance. I'm talking candles. I'm talking some light jazz, something by Kenny G, perhaps playing as my wife and I stare into each other's eyes and we enjoy some delicious home-cooked meal. But the truth is, that doesn't always happen. And yeah, when there's no time to cook, it's tempting to get takeout. But even then, you gotta wait for your food. Who needs to do that? Look, now instead of spending 20 minutes stressing about what to have for dinner, I use that time to prepare my own delicious, healthy meal with the new quick and easy meal plan from Sunbasket. Look, you know Sunbasket. Their meal kits always make it easy and convenient to cook healthy, delicious meals at home, no matter how much experience I have in the kitchen, you have in the kitchen, and now getting a meal on the table is even faster and more foolproof with Sunbasket's new quick and easy meal plan. I'm talking super fast Thai turkey lettuce cups or simple sausage tacos with bell pepper, chili salsa, and queso fresco. Come on. Look, go to sunbasket.com/curious today to learn more and get $35 off your first order. That's sunbasket.com/curious for $35 off Sunbasket. sunbasket.com/curious. I find that too with my friends. Like, do you find as you get older that your tastes have sort of reverted back to the comfort foods of your youth?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I find myself really like it's really great that I live in LA because there's so much good Korean food and like I always say like I can't move to I would never be able to move to the West Side because you're too far away from Koreatown. Like I need to
Right.
be able to go to Koreatown at least like a couple times a month to eat Korean food. And then that's also what I think about when with my kids because they're half Korean, but like I don't cook Korean food really. And so like they don't really yeah, that's not going to be like in their deep memory when they're
Right.
older of like Korean food, and I want it to be. So, I'm trying to, uh, trying to introduce that to them because I don't want their memories of their like sense memories of like sentimental food experiences to all just be like kind of these,
Cheesecake Factory.
yeah, mac and cheese and all that. Yeah.
Wherever white people eat, you know.
Right.
I mean, I go through that too, thinking about like my wife is Irish Catholic, and I grew up like this hot-blooded Jew in New York, and it's just my mom and I. Whereas my wife has this big, wonderful family, who is such a big reason why I fell in love with her was that she had this huge family, and yet I do think about that too, having kids one day and being like, oh man, like I feel like maybe the Judaism will be underrepresented.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, how am I gonna, infuse that into their lives?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I guess, and it's clearly a thing that almost every couple in history has grappled with.
Right.
Was like the little bit of like how much of me is going to be in there and how much of you.
Right.
But yeah, living in America. I mean, I think that's the tricky thing for me is like living in America. Like the default is American food and American culture, and and even though that's how I grew up, like I do want to feel a little bit of a Korean identity, with my kids.
And this is just one more tangent, but it's one thing that I love about. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about like usually people that weren't born in the U.S. is that their kids are forced at a young age to try so many things and have a palate that's so open to. I mean, especially like Korean food, those flavors are distinct and strong, and kimchi and all these things. And then, but really from any other culture, and I feel like in America, we do things pretty bland, like
Yeah.
tenders,
Yeah,
mac
yeah.
and cheese,
Yeah.
pasta, and I feel like if people are picky teenagers or picky adults, it was a failure of the parent to
Oh, yeah.
not make them try shit.
Yeah,
Right?
Totally. But the thing is, I don't understand. I don't really know which it is. Like, do kids like with all things regarding to parenting? I think a lot of people will say the kids kind of end up they rebel for a little bit, but then they kind of come home and they end up sort of wanting to recreate their childhood
Right.
and bring those things back. But I know plenty of people also who just like they had a childhood where they ate like the same thing every night and now all they want to do is eat crazy food all the time.
Right.
And so I really wish I knew the answer because it would really make a big difference in how I chose to raise my kids because like I don't know like are they going to want to be like are they going to like look back fondly on the way they were raised or are they going to go in the opposite direction? Like it would be great to know that.
It's hard. I find myself craving chicken soup way more now in my 30s as a Jew.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, like soup and
Yeah.
just like certain things. And I also think like, there is a balance, right? Because I find growing up with my mom and her friends that were all very East Coast Jewish, sort of the prototypical or the stereotypical Jewish women, but in the best ways. And I realize I'm overgeneralizing, so don't send me emails. But like, and then I think that part of me was why I was so attracted to someone like my wife, who I knew I was like, I'm gonna marry a waspy shiksa, like a blonde-haired goddess who's not Jewish
Right.
and doesn't talk to me the way my mom does. Like, there's no way I'm ever gonna marry my mom.
Yeah.
And that's true today. And yet, then there's all these other parts of me that so hunger for the way I was raised and want to give that to my kids.
I know, yeah. And so was your mom was she born and raised in New York?
Jersey.
Oh, Jersey. Okay. Yeah, because the other thing I worry about is just like the connection I would have to that culture. It's really already tenuous. Because
Right.
like I don't speak Korean very well. Like so. Whenever I've gone to Korea on vacation, it's always been with my parents.
Right.
Except for maybe once. And so like when I become the oldest generation, like, am I even going to be able to like recreate it if I tried? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I don't think I would love to feel like I could take my kids to Korea and stuff, but like that connection, the connection that made it easy would be gone.
Do you feel any pressure from your parents to give your kids that, or are they just kind of like along for the ride?
My parents are just great about never pressuring me, even if that's what they think.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I go like, so I kind of overcompensate. So like one of my kids like loves kimchi,
Right.
which I think is hilarious because it's like spicy and and she just wants to like inhale it, which is hilarious.
Love it.
And so like I'm always like sending my parent, like they're not asking me about it. I'm just like kind of trying really desperately to like get them to like
Videos of your daughter.
yeah, just showing the
kimchi.
videos. Yeah, because like I just want them to feel like that I give a shit, even if they don't. Personally, maybe they don't give a shit.
I could imagine the texts in the video just like mom and dad were like going full Chun on that kimchi right now.
I know. And yeah, it's like I feel like I'm sort of overcompensating, like in some insecure way about like my own failure at being a good Korean. Like the fact that maybe my daughter will be better at it than I am would be, I think, gratifying for my parents.
Right. And so your dad's a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where did the creativity come from?
Well, everyone always said my dad was funny, like, but he was like primarily funny in Korean, so I couldn't tell if it was true
Right.
or not. I don't know. I mean, I think it came a little bit from wanting to sort of, wanting to make friends and feeling a little bit insecure. So that was part of it. I think I was partially, I think maybe it's a little bit of my personality to not want to have wanted to sort of avoid the cliches, the stereotypes,
Right.
Of Asians, of like being really. I was really good at science and math,
Yeah, you went to college and majored in science, right?
Yeah, it was a biological anthropology, which is like it's kind of science. It's science for wimps, but like.
But at Harvard. No big deal. It's not science at LA Valley College, where I took one class once and dropped out. It's our local community college in the Valley. I'll tell you more later.
I just like I was really self-aware of like or self-conscious of being like a piano playing math whiz, Korean.
Right.
So I just wanted to be seen as something else. And so I remember even to that, like I feel bad like in high school, like I was on sort of some of the nerdier clubs, like the trivia team and the math team and stuff. And like I was like this like I was like Allen Iverson. I wouldn't show up for practices and stuff.
Damn,
and I
tough
was just
guy.
like I was like I don't really care about this. Like I'll show up for the games maybe.
Yeah.
But like, and I was being such a dick about it. But like part of it was just like I didn't want to be branded as like the guy on the math team.
That's awesome.
So
That's like how I was a tough guy at performing arts high school, And I'm like, maybe I'll go to singing class, maybe not. Like, I don't know. Maybe I won't warm up today. And so, and you're one of three, right? Mm-hmm. You're the middle.
Yeah.
And did you find that your brothers were your brothers are artists as well, or no?
My younger brother is really creative. My older brother was also creative, and he participated in the arts and stuff, but he professionally has gone in a more sort of sports and business direction.
So maybe they took the pressure off, like you could be the outlier going for more of the artistic thing.
He was definitely, he majored in economics and stuff, so yeah, he definitely was a little bit more kind of straight and narrow,
Right.
which was nice, yeah.
And it's funny because I asked Jeremy this, and I'll ask anyone this, but is it just fun to drop the H-bomb into the conversation? I mean, I want to be able to say Harvard. I want to be able to say UCLA.
And like in college, they call it the H-bomb,
Right.
And they use it in the context of like talking to girls, like trying to like hit on people.
Right.
It never worked even a tiny bit.
Not even a bit.
Oh yeah. The amount that people would like mythologize the H-bomb and then the practical reality of it was just a complete opposite. It's like it
Right.
never worked. And I think maybe like if I think maybe like now that if Jeremy he is not hitched yet.
Right.
And I think that like maybe now with when you're kind of sort of maybe a little more mature and you're sort of thinking about the whole picture of a person, maybe that would be a little bit more meaningful to a girl.
Right.
But like in college, like at a freaking at a kegger or something. Like no one cares. Like
Right.
you're at a different school, like at Penn State or something. No one cares that some dude went to Harvard. They just like you're reading as a nerd to them, not as like whatever boyfriend material.
Yeah, it's not the currency you want it to be.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a spectrum of funny, and it just so happens that a lot of incredibly funny, talented people come out of Harvard and the Ivy League, and then there are people that never went to college that are so inherently funny that it's not fair. Do you find, like, just as from an outsider's perspective, I look at people that went to Harvard and why they tend to be so funny and have so much success in Hollywood is that they've been prepared with a certain expectation of workload, of what they have to what they have, tasks that they have to complete. So at like a young age, at 18, you knew that like you were going to have to deliver X, Y, and Z at every turn. And I feel like that only compounds as you get more and more successful.
Yeah. I mean, well, first I will say I think the vast majority of people at Harvard are incredibly unfunny.
Right.
But there are a lot of really funny people who came from there. And I think, there's certainly a lot of people who I've met, and not just from Harvard, who, but they're like kind of smart, analytical people, and they've kind of learned to be good at comedy almost by like approaching it as math or as like a science or something. You know what I mean?
Craftsman.
Yeah. Kind of studying the formulas and the rhythms and sort of and analyzing what makes something funny and really applying.
You think so?
I think so, and really sort of
Really?
applying themselves to comedy the way they applied themselves previously to school or something like that. I've definitely met some people like that. And the other thing for me was just I got training in it at school, and that's not something most people get in college. When you're like 18, 19, 20 years old, most people don't have a place they can go like I did, which was the Harvard Lampoon, where you're sitting around funny people all day, pitching jokes, trying to make each other laugh, trying to outdo each other comedically. Like anything, it's a skill. It's something that you have to. It's something you have to get better at, and you get better with practice. And just the majority of people who I know who didn't go to Harvard and ended up out here, they were just like at some other college, and they just kind of felt like they didn't really fit in. They didn't have a club that they really cared about. They were really into comedy, but they basically had like one funny friend, and they hung out with that person the whole time. And then they came out here with no experience, in writing comedy, and maybe they took UCB classes or something, and that was the community, and they started to have that community that they needed, after college, which is also super important.
Spending the years taking gen ed classes at SUNY Purchase. And
I know,
shit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's so much, I think there's a reason why there's these kind of feeders and like certain schools that kind of seem to produce more comedy writers than other places. It's not just Harvard, like Emerson or Syracuse. I know a lot of people, and I think it's because there is a little bit of a community there for whatever reason. There's a place where you could go while you were in college and like learn it and get better at it.
It's encouraged.
Yeah.
And the Lampoon is sort of this mythical thing. So do they do any vetting before you get into college, or is it something that once you're there, then you just sort of meet the right people? Is it like a secret society, like the Skulls? Do you have to do any sort of?
It's kind of it's sort of a secretive society, but the thing
Really, I was just pulling for that one, but tell me more.
There's like a building. There's a building, and you're not allowed in unless you're a member. You're only allowed into the library, and then the upstairs and the downstairs are off limits.
Are there membership cards?
There are no membership cards.
Handshakes?
No. There's like you get a medal. You get like
solid.
Yeah, so like I have a medal at my house.
Really?
If I were to wear it, I guess to the castle, I guess they would let me in without. I don't know, but I'm sure you can also buy it on eBay.
Is it a gold medal?
It's like bronze or something, or brass. Or something
Okay,
like
a precious metal, nevertheless.
Yeah, it has a picture of like a jester riding a horse or something like that. Yeah.
Solid.
But yeah, to get on, like it's a secret society, but the thing that makes it not quite a frat or like a sorority or anything like that is that it's ostensibly a meritocracy. You can get in, you don't have to, it's not a social club. The membership is based on writing ability as opposed to like whether or not you're pretty or cool or whatever.
Right.
So, and thank God, because a lot of really ugly people ended up on the Lampoon, and they wouldn't have any other social home at
Solid.
Harvard.
Is there any hazing or vetting? Are you allowed to say?
Well, the vetting is there's a whole process. I mean, the whole you spend a whole semester writing comedy pieces, like, you know, that are sort of in the style of the magazine, and then they have a series of cuts. So, like, you get whittled down in a couple of stages,
Right.
And then finally they have an election, and and usually, like, a process that starts with, like, 100 people, ends up being weeded down to something like 4 who end up making it on at the end of the semester.
Right. I just imagine like 10 skinny comedy writers like naked in the middle of the night and like getting screamed at like, what are George Carlin's dirty words? Like,
There's none of that. No.
5 Rodney Dangerfield jokes. No. Where's Lenny Bruce from?
It's really not like that at all. I mean, and like, yeah, there's no, there's not really a whole lot of like, I guess there's some like kind of comedic scholarship going on in that building, but really it's mostly just a place where people go and like fuck around and
Right.
And kind of learn by doing. There's not like a lot of like, I mean, there's always like a couple of people who are these like weird like students of comedy, the way sort of like Sam Levine's character on Freaks and Geeks, it's like
Right.
a little bit of a weirdo who's like obsessed with Gary Shandling and stuff like that.
Right.
But no, there's, for the most part, it's just like a bunch of like misfits who just want to like get drunk and be idiots and like pull pranks and and get in trouble.
Be funny.
Yeah.
Do you think, was there a part of you entering into, obviously your first gig being The Simpsons and having that workload be revealed to you where you're like, oh, I've been doing this for 4 years already. Like I can hang with this. Because I imagine that Harvard would require you to be, operate at a certain level at all times. Whereas I, just from the outsider perspective, watching sort of the grind of a TV show and having to churn out pages every day and have episodes ready, I mean, the workload's immense.
Having gone to Harvard, I think, or any sort of rigorous school, like, yeah, I guess that's good training for, for any sort of job that's arduous and grueling. One of the biggest things that jumped out at me when I went into my first professional writing job was this idea that you have to be funny every day. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Most people, I think, who are creative types or, musicians, artists or whatever, especially when they're younger, they just feel like, like I'll do it when mood strikes or like when
right.
the muse arrives.
Reveals,
you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, so like working on a TV show, especially, it's a little bit different with movies because you're kind of on your own a lot of the time. But like with TV show, you show up every day and you start writing a funny show. And like I think the biggest skill that differentiates sort of the amateurs and the professionals in comedy writing, at least, is the comedy professionals can do it every day. They summit it every day. They show up to work, they clock in, and they're funny. You know what I mean?
But would you gauge yourself having days like Monday through Friday? Would 3 of the days be a 8, and then one day is a 6 and one day is a 10? Like, or is it all pretty much at the same average every day?
Early on, it felt like there would be days where I was like, I suck today, and then, I was really good today, and,
Right.
But, but I do think, it's like, it's
a muscle.
It's something that you just kind of, it's a muscle, it's a craft. And so now when I show up at a show, I don't really think of it as like, oh, I hope I'm funny today. I just think like, okay, this is my job. Like, this is how I'm gonna perform at the same level I pretty much try to perform at every day.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And the trouble with creativity and what kills me, and I don't know if you ever go through this, is, when people will say, even if people have, I dealt with it the other day with a friend of mine who's like a really successful musician. And he was like, I'm going to try acting. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, first of all, I don't need any more competition. But I'm also like, I think the reason why things like being a lawyer or a doctor is so revered is because it bars entry, because it requires so much work.
Right.
Like, so no one's flippantly being like, maybe I'll try law.
Yeah.
Or like being a doctor. It's like, no, it's going to be, that's going to be 10 years of your life. But with something creative, a creative endeavor, the romanticized way it's portrayed is like just one day it all clicks and the planets align and all of a sudden you're great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that kills me, because it's so to the contrary. It's just it's a lot of trudging like anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something. Yeah, it took me a while to learn. Of course, there's always the exceptions, and that's really frustrating when you see that. Someone who's like first scripts is incredible.
Kind of you. I mean,
no.
Your first
not.
job out of the gate being
My first
Simpsons?
job, but yeah, no. I mean, I don't think like if when I dig up the old scripts I wrote, they're a mess.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions. But yeah, I mean, and also so much of like at least writing for TV and comedy and screenwriting is like the stuff that's not being funny, the other parts of it, coming up with the stories, the structure of it, writing characters well, writing dialogue well, and all that stuff. And that stuff, that's the sort of stuff that you can definitely learn. I'm not sure how much you can learn to be funny. Like if you're not, I think you can learn to sort of be funny-ish or like, be kind of, I think you can learn to be sort of
adjacent to funny.
Yeah, like kind of simulate funniness,
witty
in a way, but
yeah.
But also that's like pretty close to what I think the definition of a hack is.
Right.
But like truly funny people, I don't know how much like they can just like learn that by sitting in a room and just like watching and trying harder. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's certainly I think there's funny people who don't know how to like channel it into jokes or into scripts. Like they have it in them, but they haven't really figured out how to kind of like recreate it. And also there's plenty of really funny people, just like the funniest person you've ever talked to in your life, but then like as writers, like their scripts are not funny. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like I think you can learn to channel it into the script, but yeah, there's not a lot of people I've met who I was like, I don't know if they're very funny, and then like 2 years later, like they're hilarious.
Right. It just sort of emerged.
Yeah.
No, I think that's so right, because it's funny. It was something that D'Onofrio was saying in the class the other day to the effect of like, with all creative endeavors, there is sort of this thing, and I know it, where you can do a lot of work on a scene and prepare, but inevitably sometimes you'll have a magic of the first 2 or 3 takes where it's really flying, and you're like,
yeah.
that was good.
Yeah.
Or like you walk out of an audition, and you're just like, oh, I'm so glad that went well. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And
yeah, totally. That's so interesting. Yeah, because like, I think, some of it is just like, it's because it's so creative. So there's no like, at the end of the day, you can't quite analyze exactly what makes it great,
Right.
And I think, and that's why so many people's process, like in making comedy, is like they want to play or they want to have it feel loose and natural, and they just want to kind of find something.
Right.
And like, Apatow is famous for that, of just kind of messing around on set and throwing out different things and just kind of letting them improvise, because sometimes magic happens.
But you seem, from my recollection of when we were working together, you seemed a little bit more, you were open to that, and something that I like, you were like, I've spent a good amount of time making sure these beats work. Let's honor this first. And then if we have the time, like we can try to beat it or one up it. Or if something's not working, we'll fix it. But like, let's do what's written here, because there's, as you know, like with comedy, there's such a rhythm, and whether you're funny or not, it's like music. You can hear a sour note.
Yeah.
Where something's not hitting right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean, you're a really funny improviser, and I think, some performers have experience with that, and some don't. And, sometimes I just feel like I love to let actors play, because I think that's, I want them to be happy, and I want them to, and sometimes you do get great stuff. But a lot of the times, I mean, like I've certainly worked with actors who they're not comfortable with that. They don't,
right.
That's not how they work, and it's just rare that, in the business of making TV shows, you have a limited amount of time. So like, if you've got a cast, not saying that this was the grandfather cast, but just hypothetically, if you've got a cast where, they're just not improvisers by nature, do you really want to like use up a quarter or a third of your takes on just stuff that almost never is going to end up in the show, right?
Right, of course.
The other thing is also like, and I probably am a little too attached to sort of the way that the lines sort of are sort of interlocked with each other.
Right.
But sometimes in sometimes in improv, like you'll throw out a little piece of dialogue or a little piece of a line that is actually, in my opinion, important. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, like, we needed that part, you know, and that's, so sometimes like I'm a little afraid of improv for that reason. It's like, cause like, there's two things that are actually really important to get across in this scene. And when sometimes in improv, like that gets thrown away.
Right.
And
to serve the joke for the moment.
Yeah. And I think certain writers are a little bit more loose and on the fly, and they can sort of try to adapt to it or something. But, you know, a lot of the times, you know, in my experience, like you just end up being like, well, yeah, that was a funny joke, but it really kind of destroys the episode
right.
in some way.
But we're not going anywhere special now.
I mean, The Office was like, you know, Carell, one of the greatest improvisers, you know, alive. And then Ed Helms, also incredibly good. So, and then, you know, and Rainn Wilson, even though he wasn't from that background, really funny, you know, Krasinski, so, and you know, Ellie Kemper, and so really funny improvisers. So in those ones, we would often let them really play because they were just funnier than us sometimes.
Well, and I imagine too, it probably, there was a lot more playing going on season 5 than season 1, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, I wasn't there early on, but yeah, I think at a certain comfort level,
you know the characters, you sort of, everyone's in a good, a good vibe.
Totally. And it also, it's like, it's the style of the show, and I think that the show, The Office, kind of started to write a little bit more towards a framework where you could play within it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the lines maybe weren't written in such a kind of a precise, tight way that you couldn't undo any of it. You couldn't like unzip it, or else it'd all fall apart.
I think it's also, I was listening to Sorkin interview the other day, and you know, they sort of nicely said, you love your words.
Right.
And he was like, yeah. And he said, there's not a lot of rooms for yas and buts or uhs in my writing. He said, because I like dialogue that sounds written. He said, because there's a musicality to it. He said, because I grew up with musicals and theater where it's all on the page.
Right.
And he said, you know, I might have a payoff at beat 20 that needs to be set up in beat 5. And if you're not working towards that, or you veer off, then all of a sudden 20 becomes, it doesn't land.
Right.
And so I think there's definitely a balance, and I think what's been sort of on trend as of late, and Apatow is the best example of it because he sort of created that, is put 2 funny people in a room and run the cameras.
Right.
But then sometimes I think it's easy to sort of lean on and just say, well, something will come out and we've got the time to shoot it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it comes across where you're like, was this scene really written? Or
right.
was this kind of just sort of edited together as best you could?
And when I think about that, I also sometimes I wonder, you know, I've never been an actor, but I think part of also why like those scenes where it feels like they were just playing, and it feels like kind of, you know, and you get the sense that maybe it was improvised. Like part of what I think my theory would be about why those are appealing is also just because acting is really hard. Like acting natural or real, but being really faithful to the script, it takes a lot of skill,
right?
You know, and it's not so a lot of times I feel like those moments just are more fun to watch because they really were being natural and real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're organic.
Yeah, and so even sometimes I feel like maybe the scripted joke was funnier but like you're willing to sacrifice that because this moment just feels light and real and normal, and it doesn't feel like 2 people sort of acting and sort of, you know, in a way that in some sort of instinctual way feels a little bit fake. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's such a good example of when we made Grandfathered and seeing, like, I feel like John and I were of that ilk where we like to play more because, you know, we probably felt more comfortable as ourselves and exactly inhabiting every single line. And then there was Paget, who was probably funnier than the both of us, who was like, she was like, I don't need to play. Like, I'll say the words. And it was like, but she was a craftsman, and she devoted her full respect and attention to the words and made them fly. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, it was so interesting on that show to just sort of learn the different ways each of you sort of approached the same job.
Right.
You know, and yeah, Paget was really, you know, because I've certainly worked with people who just have to kind of do it from a very sort of ground up, like from inside their soul is where it starts, you know?
Right.
It's like I got to like understand what I'm feeling in this moment, and I got to really inhabit that, and then I'll learn the words, but if the words don't but if the words don't feel consistent with that, then I'm gonna have to change the words. Like I'm not gonna, I can't say this line. Like I've worked with actors who's like, I can't say this line. It just doesn't feel
Right.
right.
And that happens.
And like Paget, who, yeah, I agree, is like incredibly funny, incredibly talented, like one of the greatest people I've ever had, worked with on a show. She'll say if there was like a crazy typo in the line,
Right.
you know what I mean? So the line literally doesn't make sense. She would not have brought it up with us. She would have just said it in the best way she could and just like been like, my job is to figure out a way to make that line make sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like those are the lines. Those are the words I'm supposed to say.
Right.
So like my job is to just try to do it well.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
And do you think that, I'm interested to know exactly because, and I guess this is me revealing something as far as, so you were nice enough to cast me on Grandfathered. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
I'm honored.
I was waiting for that.
I feel so lucky. And Grandfathered was where we got to meet and how I got to, see greats like you and Jeremy sort of at work. And so the character that you had written for that I was lucky enough to play was slightly or maybe majorly influenced by your younger brother, right? Or
a lot of it, yeah.
In the beginning,
yeah,
at least?
early on, yeah, and then it kind of adapted more to sort of, we kind of wrote it more towards you as we got to know you, but early on it was sort of kind of based on him.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads me to my question because, and I'll give you like some insight into my experience where I felt as though I was lucky enough to meet your younger brother and he was awesome. And I immediately saw the parallels between the character and him. And then there were times where I was like, I'm not sure if I'm quite hitting this or the way that, or honoring Danny's brother or whatever the inspiration was. I wasn't sure whether I was quite hitting the beats that maybe were in your head or what was required of it. And I was just doing the best that I could with sort of my, set of tools.
Yeah.
So for you, like, obviously you create a character in your head and then you cast the actor. Like, what's it like sort of seeing someone take this character who you made and then make it their own for better or for worse at times?
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing that I've definitely, that's one thing that I've been trying to get better at really as a writer. And, again, like starting at The Simpsons, it was already well established and those people were, and it was also animated, so it was a little bit more malleable where you would write the script and the actors who had been doing it for so long, you knew you knew what you were gonna get.
Right.
And the animation, you could, if it wasn't right, you could change it.
Right.
But on a show like Grandfathered and other shows like live action shows I've worked on, I've realized, like Speechless, which is the show I'm on right now, I think I've realized how important it is to be willing to adjust and to be willing to kind of, find what works best for the person who's inhabiting the role. Like, and like for you, for example, like, yeah, it was kind of originally based on my brother because I felt like it was going to be sort of this millennial character, right? This like kind of sort of, boyish guy who had all these kind of geeky interests. And my brother, I felt like had a really sort of, was a very unique version of that and not sort of the cliche version you've seen a million times on TV. And so that's why I was like, okay, like there's quirks and there's specificity in that I want to channel so that this character doesn't feel boring.
Right.
And yeah, and you came in the audition and you were amazing and we loved you. But as we wrote the show, what we found like that we liked the most from you was, rather than sort of playing you as a boy, as a kind of a boyish man, was playing you as like this kind of winning, mature guy who was just really trying his hardest and sort of trying to be this kind of grown up adult man that his own father was not.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so we found that, so we had started to write towards that more, because that was a dynamic that we really, as we kind of fell in love with John's character, Jimmy, being this like incredibly immature, ridiculous playboy child.
Right.
Like it felt like the really nice counterpoint to that was you as, being his son, but being so much more
trying to do
of
the
a
right
grown
thing.
up and of a moralistic and person with integrity than he was, which I thought was really worked. And so we did kind of change the character on the fly, and that was like because of you. If we cast somebody else, we probably would have, gone in a different direction.
Right. Yo, what's up, guys? It's Josh Peck. I mean, I know you were just listening to me, and now this is like a weird interjection, but just stick with me for a second. Did you know that every single episode of Curious is now on Spotify? I know. What did you do? Something right? What did you rub a genie lamp? Well, let me tell you, yes, the same app that has millions of songs now also has thousands of podcasts. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite shows, Curious, and discover new ones. Not too many, but yeah, sure, enjoy. Have your fun. To subscribe to our show, search for Curious, tap follow, and get every new episode delivered to you. Podcasts on Spotify. They're streaming right now, and now, and now. Do you think that... So I'm interested because I think people... it's so interesting to see that, like, at every point when you write a pilot and then it gets optioned and then you actually get the chance to make it and then it gets picked up and then you get a season and then maybe more, it's like the percentages become smaller and smaller. But even the mere fact of finishing a pilot is a small percentage, and then at each step you're sort of distilled down more. So for you, like, because I think people are interested, how did you, because I know you met John first, will you take us through just, an abbreviated of like how it started and all the way through making the show?
Totally, yeah. And so this was kind of like, this was my second or third development cycle that I had been a part of. And I had never had a show on the air at that point. And so my agent wanted me to do something for a star, because that, for a lot of reasons. I think creatively it can be inspiring to know who you're writing for.
Right. Hollywood likes stars? Yeah. Oh, that helps you get a show made? Gotcha.
And so he paired me up. He set me up on just like a breakfast or with John. And I was just like, I'm just gonna kind of think of some ideas to pitch him. I just want to like come up with some show ideas for John.
Right.
And so I came up with the idea for Grandfather. I pitched it to him. I was like a little bit afraid because I was like, yeah, would you play a grandfather? Like,
yeah.
And John, to his credit, like loves to make fun of himself.
What'd you have for breakfast? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It was at the Glen Deli on Beverly Glen.
Fancy.
I really don't remember. I'm sure he had like one egg white or something.
Yeah, something perfect.
And like a tomato slice.
That's so him. Whatever you said that you ate, you would have. I'm sure every writer that listened to this would be like, I guess I got to start eating more oatmeal. That's how you get the creative juices flowing.
No, my like I'm always like eating like 2 breakfast burritos and then like taking a 3-hour nap and be like, why did I do that? I need to stop. I need to learn that the food I put in my body affects how I feel.
No one needs that. You do CrossFit in your garage. You're doing fine.
But yeah, so I pitched him the idea. He liked it. Like, so we both called our agent, who's the same guy, and said like, hey, we want to work on this together. And our agent, whose job is to kind of come up with like, think about the business side of it, was like, what would really make this, a killer package would be Dan Fogelman coming on board as a producer, this big shot, producer writer guy, and also he, he writes like emotional stories, like kind of, he's like maybe the preeminent guy in Hollywood right now with his show This Is Us, of like writing emotional sort of character family stories.
Right.
So it did make creative sense as well, and so we all sort of met. We talked about it. We came up with, we went out to like Craig's and talked about the show and I came up with the pitch, and then we went around town and and I pitched it, with those guys in the room, which having them in the room helps.
Sure.
Certainly. And and then we were sort of off to the races, and we and at that time Fox was sort of had a little bit of a blank slate of what they were doing, and so they were like, maybe we're the John Stamos network now.
And when you're pitching it, is it sort of the standard way we think of pitches, which is like, how do I give the strongest, most exciting 2.5 minute, sort of pitch that I can right now, and then we'll get into logistics later? Or is it sort of more of a long-winded, like...
It's more of like and I feel like my pitches are always too long, but it was probably more like a 15-minute pitch.
Gotcha.
But I think like the average, I would say like my target is usually like 10 or 12 minutes as a pitch.
And is it are you telling a great story? like that you would like we all have them, right? And is that the feeling of it? Like you're never like get on this, like buckle up because this ride's about to be crazy.
No. The answer to that is hell no. I mean, I'm not. I think that's like there's so many great pilots out there where it's like someone's personal story, and like by the end of it, everyone in the room, like in like the Fox, in like the Fox executive building, is sobbing or something like that.
Right.
That's not me. I've never had that, and I've never done that, and like, so for me, it was really just like here's
The beats.
Here's like here's. I think the pitch is usually structured to me. When I try a pitch, I try to structure it like here's sort of like the hook of it. Like here's what I think is like the thing that the thing I want to lead with, whatever that is, whether it's a character or a dynamic or just or a premise,
Right.
whatever that is, just to get them on board. It is in a certain way structured like a story. The pitch, you do have to grab them at the beginning, and then you have to, and then like kind of create a few questions in their mind of like, and then answer those questions before they have to ask them.
Right.
And so you really feel like my goal always is like early on, create interest, make sure that they, tell them, get them excited for the same reason I'm excited about it, whatever that is. And then for the next, whatever, 8-10 minutes, prove that I've really figured this out and I've thought about it and I know it like the back of my hand. Like, here are the characters, here's the world, here are some of the possible adventures they have or the funny situations you put them in.
The season 1 arc or like the entire show? Like if you gave me 6 seasons,
right?
Like because I've heard that before, like, and I find it's a 50-50 thing where some executives will be like, we don't expect you to know what happens if this goes 10 seasons.
Yeah.
Or some will be like, it'd be great to see if you actually have the next 100 episodes thought out, or at least an overall directional, and maybe that's more plot-based shows.
I think like if it was like if you're pitching a real sort
Lost,
then I think I'm sure you would be expecting that question and you'd need to have an answer.
Right.
For me, usually I half expect that question, and so I half figure it out. Like I kind of like I spend a little time trying to make sure like, okay, if they ask me like what's season 3 about the show, like have some answer for that.
Right.
But I very rarely, they in my experience, they very rarely want me to unprompted walk them through the whole first season or the whole arc of the series. Like, they just are bored.
They have a lunch.
Yeah, they're
they
bored.
Need to get to.
Like, they've got 15 other pitches that day. So, no, I'm not going to, I'm always hyper concerned of just being boring in those pitches. So I always try to, like, kind of get the essential stuff out. Then if they have questions, feel like I have the answers to those questions.
Right.
But only if they ask them.
And then and I had this experience, I only knew what my experience was being on the show and feeling like, how hard we worked and how well it was received and then inevitably us not getting picked up for the second season. Like, I'd love to know if you're willing to sort of elaborate on it a little bit of like, what's it like being, because I was an actor for hire and this was your baby, and then inevitably just with how challenging and competitive the TV landscape is to inevitably go like, all right, so we're only going to make one season of these and I'm going to have to move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the job of like show running, especially on like a network show, like one kind of nice thing about it is it's so hard and so unpleasant that like by the end of it, like you're always half okay. Like you're always like
relieved,
ultimately fine either way.
Right.
That's how I felt. I was like, of course I wanted to come back, but if it doesn't, like my quality of life will.
You're like, I have a
beautiful
better, like, wife and
the
kids.
color of my hair will come back. Like, yeah, I'll probably like be able to get back in shape and eat, things that whatever.
Jason Alexander said about Larry David at the end of every Friday night taping of Seinfeld that Larry David would walk away going, "It can't be done. Can't do it again. It can't be done." And that was like mid-season when they had the next 10 episodes written.
Yeah.
It's like, it can't be done.
It's every time it feels like you're climbing how many episodes you do. We did 22 in that first season. Like, it feels like 22 times I had to climb a mountain,
I bet.
But like, yeah, it's difficult, but like I'm realistic about the state of, like, first of all, it was not like it was not my baby in the way that some shows are someone's baby, where it's like, this is about my family. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I had a little bit of distance in that way. You know, I think like I'm on a show, Speechless, right now, that's, you know, really based on the creator's life. And, you know, and I think for a long time, he resisted doing that show because he knew it was going to be so raw and so personal for him, that for it to go wrong, or for it to, you know, be unpleasant in one of the billion ways it can go wrong.
Right.
You know, he would have been really sort of damaged and hurt about that, and it would have taken a lot to get over that. So for me, I had a little bit of that distance, thankfully, but it still was, you know, obviously it was really tough to feel like you put in that much work, and you have all these people who you've employed, and you love them all, and you want to keep it going, and you want to keep telling more stories, and you're having fun, and by the end of a season, often you feel like, oh, we finally have it figured out. You know, I hope we can do some more, because like it's going to be so much easier the next time.
Right.
So yeah, all those feelings, but like I'm realistic. It's like I've been on shows before, you know, where that I was happy about. We were proud of the show, didn't get picked up because, you know, that's the
Things
state of
you
TV,
couldn't control.
and that's the state of TV right now. You know, like I've been on so many shows where the ratings were borderline, and then the show does not come back, and the next season they come out with a bunch of new shows and the ratings are worse.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's just because of the overall way that TV's going, or whatever, and the way that the ratings are not necessarily sort of reflective of how people watch TV nowadays. And so I wasn't surprised, you know. I was braced for it, because like they drag it out for months. They give you plenty of time to think about it and
Right.
and get ready for it. And then by that time I wasn't surprised. And like they took us off the air for like a month, and then they aired like the final 3 episodes or something like a month later.
Yeah.
It's like it was like they were trying to, like, you know, snuff it out intentionally almost, you know what I mean?
It's so funny. And then, you know, I did an Amazon pilot 2 years before Grandfather, like in 2014, and we were so proud of it. And then I remember Amazon took us out to this beautiful dinner with all the producers and the actors, and the show had premiered and it was doing great, the pilot. And they took us out to dinner the 2 nights before. They said, we're not picking up the show.
Oh my God.
I'm like, motherfuckers, like, I didn't need dinner.
Yeah.
Like, who you trying to prove? Like, what are
Yeah.
you trying to prove? And,
Yeah.
I mean, the dinner was delicious. So I guess, if nothing
Yeah, it's
else.
better than not getting the dinner, I guess.
I
but-
suppose, paying for your own dinner.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's, yeah, like I think the most successful people in this industry are the ones who don't get hung up on failure and just keep on going. You know what I mean? Like, there's like,
Yeah.
I feel like the ones who are really, and by successful I mean rich. I mean, like,
Right.
the ones who are literally like, I've got 5 things going on right now. Okay, this one just died. Okay, it doesn't matter. I have 2 other things that I want to do. I'm just gonna keep going and going and going. You know what I
Something
mean?
will hit.
Like, if you're the kind of person, and like, you know, it's nice to be idealistic and artistic about stuff, but like if you're the kind of person who's like, I've got one story in me and I need to tell it, and this
You're
is my one
screwed.
shot, oh my God, and then, you know, like, then you're screwed.
I mean, you know, speaking of our friend Dan Fogelman, who had 3 or 4 shows on the air that only went a season or 2.
Yeah.
And then he just is like, all right. And then Grandfather doesn't work out, and his next, his next one is This Is Us.
Yeah.
But you think he's happy?
Right,
know?
yeah, no, that's true. Good point. Yeah, he's probably miserable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
success. Yeah, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not good.
So, okay, so my last 2 questions, because I don't want to keep you here all day, and because I'm an actor, and I've always wanted to ask this question of anyone who's been in the decision-making seat. And I asked Jeremy this: when you're sitting and you're auditioning actors, you're testing actors, what do certain actors do when they walk in the room where you go, you're not the guy? Like an immediate thing where you're like, fuck off, you're not the guy.
What was Jeremy's answer?
Jeremy's answer was that if you're not off book, that if there's not like a certain appreciation for at least the writing and the rhythm of things, if you're
Yeah.
really attached to the paper.
Uh-huh. That's a good answer.
yeah.
That's a really good answer. Mine is probably more petty. It's like someone comes in and tries to be a little too chummy with me or something.
Well, that's a thing, right?
You know, just a little bit like, just in a, you know, it's sweaty. I don't know if that term, you know, like the term sweaty, that's a comedy term, like sweaty, like trying too hard, you know?
Right. Desperate.
Yeah. That's, you know, just rubs you the wrong way, you know? Someone who comes in, I know that I know that they're nervous, and I know that like I would be, you know, I'd be shitting bricks if I were in that position. But, you know, like someone who has the sort of the social intelligence to either cover it up in some, in some sort of normal-ish way,
Right.
or is actually confident, which is always impressive.
Well, I feel as though there's also an aspect to whether you know it or not that you are gauging of like, yes, I want this person to be great, but also life is too short. Like, is this a person that I'm not going to mind spending 8 months a year with?
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Yeah. It's very rare in an audition that someone will like do something that makes me feel like, oh, I hate you. I don't want to spend any more time with you. That's pretty rare. But like, but yeah, there's just like, there's a certain like, it's almost like an unspoken like social contract. Just like, I know that this is a weird dynamic. I know you're nervous, and I know I'm in this weird power. It's a really horrible power imbalance. But like, let's all just pretend that this is kind of a normal thing people do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, let's all just.
There's no way around it.
Yeah, and I think if you were able to do that, then it just shows me you have a little bit of that social intelligence and that maturity that tells me like you're a healthy human being.
Right.
You're like you get it on some level.
I mean, I find that I almost, and maybe it's because I'm calloused and cynical at this point. Like, I know, especially pilot season, but for any audition, like, I'm one of 20 guys here that are all coming to say these words, and it's like, let me get in and out of here as quickly as possible. Like, let me help you by either being the guy, because I always imagine, and what we say, if you want the secret actor speech, is that like I've had actor friends being like, a great writer has written a character that presents a problem to them because now they've written this thing and they have no one to play it. So you're there to solve their problem, like to go in there and be like, here you go, like this is how I see it.
Yeah.
And in that same breath, it's also to say, here's how I see it, and it's the wrong way. I'm not the guy, but you need to see 10 more of me so that the right guy reveals itself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, let me get in and out of your hair as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, acting is, acting is hard, writing is hard. And like, I feel like, when I'm still, thankfully, like I'm excited enough about this industry and what I get to do that like, when I write something, like casting is so much fun for me because I'm just like, I want to see my words come to life. It's like the most fun thing. It's like people dream of seeing this,
Right.
So it's just like, and then like invariably like after like an hour of casting, I'm just so miserable. You know what I mean?
Of course.
I'm just so depressed because I'm just like, oh, like, do I suck as a writer or does just everybody in this town suck as actors? Like, what's going on? Why isn't this what it looked like in my brain?
But do you think that, because this is my take on it after, and it's only taking me, 21 years to realize this is like, every time that I've tried to do on the page what I think the writer wants or imagined is when I walk away hating my life, hating myself.
Yeah.
Every time that I read it and I go, I'm going to serve the writing, and yet I have a opinion on how this should go. And I'm going to craft something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but I'm going to have the guts, the courage of my conviction to present this.
Yeah.
Because I found more times than not that the writer or the director, they don't know exactly what they want. They want you to show, like, give us something.
Yeah.
That we can attach our wagon to.
Yeah. There's almost always a really obvious way to play it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, like, rest assured, I've seen that 15 times already. You know what I mean? And so, like, yeah, it's really fresh and exciting to see someone come in and, still understand what the lines are about, but just do it in a way that feels like, oh, this is different. I like this. Like they found something that just feels different, and that's just what like interesting acting is to me. You know what I mean? Like that's like the first time I feel like I noticed acting was like Mark Ruffalo and You Can Count on Me, where he played this character and like this kind of slackery character, but he had all these like weird tics and nuances where I was just like, oh, this is like so like I was like a teenager. I was almost confused. Like, is this guy just like, is this a documentary? Like, what is going on? Like how come he's like being so interesting right now?
Right.
You know what I mean? And and it wasn't like in a sweaty or overdone way, but I was just like, feels like authentic and surprising, and he's and like. And it just wasn't obvious at any points,
Right.
And that was really, so you sometimes when you get that, and like I think you did that, and like Paget, I think was both of you, I think, like kind of brought something different. But then there's also times where like, especially in comedy, where like there's just a certain way I wrote these jokes, and like why can't anyone hit the jokes? Like being able to hit a joke is a skill that a lot of actors don't have.
Right.
You know, and you know, it's a hard, comedy's hard, right? So like, just as another example, like Kelly Jenrette, like, who was
Annalise.
yeah, who was also like one of the leads of the show. Like she got cast just because like she did it exactly the way I had saw it in my brain, and like nobody else had to that point. We had seen dozens of people, and she was the first person who was like, oh my god, that is what I thought it was in my brain. So I think it can work either way, and especially I think in comedy sometimes it's just the precision of being able to hit the jokes. But yeah, like with you, when it comes to like inhabiting a character and sort of interpreting dialogue and creating a character from it, like, yeah, you were certainly that, and Paget.
And so my last question is will you take us quickly through your process as a writer when you're approaching something new? And like, is it, do you thoroughly outline things? Do you just beat around an idea for a couple months and talk it ad nauseum? And then like, how do the words inevitably get put on the page?
It used to just be, I used to not have a system, but yeah, for the last few years, like I have, again, sort of learned that like, this is a craft. Like there's a right way to do it. It's like, it's not, even though you think of it as like, I'm a writer, I'm just doing something, I'm making shit, I'm being creative, like I can do it however I want.
Bukowski at the typewriter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My process tends to be like, I'll just think about it a lot. Like write down notes, like anything, whether it's like a character or a joke or a moment, a surprise, whatever. I'll just like think about all that stuff. And then I'll start kind of outlining it in a very vague, sort of broad way, and that's when I use index cards usually, unless, if I have that at my disposal. I'll start sticking up index cards, and it'll just be like, a handful of index cards per act.
Right.
So it's you're not going into deep into the moments of each scene and every beat of the scene. You're really going into like, they meet, they hate each other. They get stuck in the rain together, and now they start to, get along or whatever,
Right.
Just the big moments, and then the act breaks. Certainly, I have to know what the act breaks are.
Right.
And then once I feel like I have that, sort of like the story in terms of like index cards at that level of depth, that's when I will write a proper outline, and I'll basically each index card will turn into a scene.
Right.
Or something, and that'll be like a paragraph on my word processor. And once I have an outline, then and I feel really strong about it, ideally I won't start writing until that has happened. And the thing that usually happens though is like I hate outlining so much that like I'll outline it halfway, or I'll do like a really kind of rushed outline, and then I'll start writing, and then I'll be like so happy, just like clicking away on my typewriter, writing, and then like I'll realize, oh shit, I should have outlined it better because this I'm stuck.
Right.
So like the lesson always is like outline, get the story rock solid, and then just write it into a script and like and basically dialogue it out and find the jokes, and that's the most delightful part of the job. But almost invariably, because outlining sucks so bad, I just want to start writing the jokes. And then I realize, like, oh, the story is completely flawed. I have to start over.
Because outlining's so unsexy.
It's not fun. It's the worst part of it, yeah.
There's no movie about a great writer who just spends the entire movie outlining.
I know.
Like, sorting the beats.
Yeah.
Figuring it out. Saving the cat. Damn it. It's a good book. Danny, thank you, dude. You're my guy. This has been amazing.
This is great. My first podcast. This is...
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Don't do any more after this.
I promise you I won't.
Please.
Because I was very nervous the whole time.
You killed it.
I don't think I had fun.
You didn't?
No, it was great.
You seemed...
No, I love hanging out with you, and the fact that there were microphones, I was just like, these are just these two... Yeah, whatever. It's just...
We'll
people
catch
get
up.
to see... The world gets to see how much fun I have chatting with my guy, Josh Peck.
Well, I will reveal that in your email when I asked you to do this, you were like, I'm sort of terrified.
Yeah.
and then I was like, no, don't worry, it's going to be great. And so none of that came across, I'm telling you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very comfortable. And you got a LaCroix out of it?
I know. I got a free LaCroix. That was great.
We've got some high-end
I got to
drinking.
charge my laptop on one of your outlets. That
Whatever
was
you
awesome.
need.
Yeah.
My power's your power. It's one thing I did talk to Jeremy about the litany of snacks that every writer's room has.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just disgusting.
It's horrible.
It's the only thing to look forward to in a writer's room is, in the dog days of figuring out how to write episodes,
Yeah.
is like the great lunch and dinner that's coming.
Yeah, yeah. It's so you get such a weird relationship with those snacks too, because like there's also like you get really sort of like annoyed when you see someone who's not on the staff like taking your snacks.
Totally.
And even though you didn't pay for them, they're
Right.
free snacks, but you just see like, who's that person? Why are they taking our granola bars?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
What are you, a PA?
And the other thing that's disgusting to me is when I go to a different show and I see their snacks.
Yeah.
There's something so sickening to me about thinking about their hands reaching into these, and these kind of like there's like rolled up bags of Doritos that don't have a clip on them.
Right.
I just like I find it, and then like little residue of like hot sauces like in like a little ring of hot sauce on the counter. I just for some reason I just find it's disgusting.
Yeah, or like, oh, you have the Costco peanut butter pretzel brand,
Right,
Like,
yeah.
You don't have the Trader Joe's one, like,
Yeah. And to me, that's like this
losers.
like means like it's because I'm a better writer than you.
Right,
It's because like
higher end
they
snacks.
shell out for the like the store the name brand.
Yeah, we're doing just fine over here.
Yeah.
Enjoy your roll golds. Thanks, dude.
Yes, so happy to be here.
Boom. That was it. Daniel Chun. Danny, the D-Man. The Chunster. The Chun effect. I don't know why I say it like that. I wouldn't do that to his face. I feel like he'd be disappointed in my attempt at giving him a weird nickname. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. I hope you had a great time. I had a great time. I have a great time hanging out with you, wherever you listen to this pod. And I'm going to continue to work at getting better and better and better. And you, the audience, you guys you're going to turn into like an unforgiving father figure for me, whose affection I'm trying to win at every turn, and I'll do whatever it takes, audience. So, guys, have a great week. Forgive yourself. Be good to yourself. You know what I mean? Because I love you. I'm going to say it. Maybe you don't hear it enough. I love you. You're enough. How about that, right? Let that wiggle around your brain box for a hot minute and think about that. You're enough. Yeah. And you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. Oh my God, what the fuck? Yo, guys, thank you again. Have a great week. See you next week. Okay? Bye.